Welcome to the Word and the Works, TWTW. We are diving into letter 3 today in Frankenstein. I'm Pastor Ben Meyer, and my co host is Pastor Jason Goodham. Letter 3, Pastor Goodham, is a short one, isn't it? It is probably as short as we're going to get when we're looking at any of the sections in this book.
It's like third John.
The third John of Frankenstein. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Honestly, the letter begins pretty mundanely, and it's just him saying, "Oh, well, I don't expect to be able to write to you anymore for a bit." And, saying, farewell for now. I hope that I'll see you again. And not a lot of detail in the first section. It's kind of bland, and you're like, okay, whatever. And then you get to the last couple paragraphs.
Yeah.
And that's where the meat of this letter comes in. That's where the theme really picks up. So he writes, "But success shall crown my endeavors. Wherefore not? Thus far, I have gone, tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being witnesses and testimonies of my triumph. Why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man?" So, what are we back to here?
Yeah, we're back to hubris and pride.
We are indeed. Yeah. Yeah. It's the hubris is just off the charts here.
Oh.
What success shall crown my endeavors? So of course I'm going to succeed. Of course. Why wouldn't I succeed? And why is he so confident that he's going to succeed? What gives him that confidence?
I think he's confident because he is so convinced that his intent is pure.
Mm-hmm.
His intent is pure, and he believes he's gone through the necessary steps to ensure his success.
Mm-hmm.
The very first letter, he lays out that the long, arduous 6 years he took to become an expert at what he does.
Yeah.
And it's this certainty that I'm going to succeed because I'm trying to succeed and I want to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such a good idea. How could it not succeed? I have such a pure heart about this that of course it's going to succeed. And do we ever see that in our day and age around us?
In spades, right?
Yeah.
We have been raised, and the message is being reinforced constantly around us that if we follow the intentions of our hearts, that we will succeed. And if we don't succeed, it's only because something evil has opposed us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's Jiminy Cricket singing about a dream is the wish your heart makes, and of course, if we follow our hearts, we're going to succeed because our hearts are pure. Well, here's the problem. What are our hearts?
Heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked.
You just made that up, didn't you?
Yep, right out of Jeremiah 17:9, right off the top of my head. It's amazing to me, and yet it shouldn't be amazing to any of us, how self-contradictory he is in his own letter writing. Now, I know we're supposed to perceive gaps between the letters, and letter 2 was dated March 17th, and letter 3 is dated July 7th. So that's a 4-month span, give or take, right?
Yeah.
So things are changed. He's had success. He's now on the sea. He's moving with ease. It's the middle of summer. Of course, he's going to reach the North Pole. Of course, the post office at the North Pole is going to be open. He can mail these letters with success to his sister. And it's this notion that the human soul has that when everything's going well, it will continue going well into perpetuity, and when everything's awful, it won't ever get better.
Yeah, and when everything is going well, why is it going well?
Because of
Because of
me.
me.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So it's that pride gets reinforced when things go well, which is one of the reasons that the Lord sometimes kicks the chair out from under us. Because if we don't have that happen, then we begin to become prideful and arrogant, and we become we look down on those who are not succeeding, because it must be something they've done wrong. It couldn't possibly be circumstances beyond their control.
And that pride is the source of that destructive theology where if you're suffering, one, it's because of a lack of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And two, it's because God is trying to teach you a lesson. And if you would only learn the lesson, your tables would turn. And we get so much bad theology out of the idea that our inner pride is something wholesome that God has programmed into our system.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well said. That line, my goodness, what can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man? I mean, goodness, that's just dripping with pride.
Oh,
It,
it's arrogant.
it is, and it's also very much, shaking your fist at God. You know, you, it's the Tower of Babel. God said, "Don't do this." Well, we'll show him. We're going to do whatever we want to do.
Well, it's the Tower of Babel. The biblical reference that I thought of when I read that line was Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm.
Right before he's turned into an animal,
Yeah,
and
he
led
becomes
out to the
animalistic. Yeah.
yeah. And he says something to the effect that, am I not Nebuchadnezzar, and is this not the kingdom I've built for my own glory?
Mm-hmm.
And God's, you fool, you shall be humbled. And he becomes, covered
Yeah.
with the dew of heaven, and he's eating grass, and he loses
Yeah.
his mind.
Yeah.
And it feels like, because next chapter we're getting introduced to Victor Frankenstein, or the next letter we are.
Yeah.
Shelley numbers the book in letters and then chapters, but
Right.
next letter we get introduced to Frankenstein, and it feels like this is Walton's Nebuchadnezzar moment. He's at the apex of what he thinks he's capable of, and he hasn't even yet reached his destination. He doesn't have actual success.
Yeah, and he doesn't. I mean, we'll find out in the next chapter. I mean, they get iced in, and then it ends up, they don't go very much farther than that. So yeah, but that whole idea of what can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man, that's all around us. I saw earlier, I had shared on Twitter the scientists saying, well, we're going to create this life without the necessity of a woman, and we're going to create this human life for the purposes of growing it to the point where then we can harvest organs from this. My goodness, that's just evil. It is
it's Frankensteinian.
Evil. It is absolutely, yes. Yeah,
because that's the whole point of Frankenstein creating the monster.
Right.
Is he creates life without a woman.
Right.
He creates it for his own glory, and in doing that, would we not ceaselessly celebrate the accomplishments of man if we were able to engineer our own organs?
Yeah.
That would be,
and it would be
triumph.
So self-serving, because the only point in doing it would be so I am, my life is bettered, right? So Frankenstein creates this. Why? For his own glory. He's not creating this for the sake of other. It's for his own sake.
And it's the secular human's quest for immortality that flows from our idolatry of self.
Right.
Again, it's the mirror but negative image of what God has given us in Christ.
Yeah. I was, as he said that, I was thinking, Frankenstein, you have the Garden of Eden comparison here. that is pretty obviously intended by Shelley, but it's kind of the bizarro Superman thing. It's not as it ought to be. Everything is just off. Everything is the wrong way, but
Oh,
it's intended to be, the right way. So it's really kind of that whole bizarro Superman idea.
I think that's great because Walton is pursuing the promised land,
Yeah.
but it's a land without vegetation. It's not lush. It's desolate and cold and frozen. And it's the promise of glory has
Yeah.
robbed him. It's as far away from the Garden of Eden as you can possibly get.
It
And
really is.
the northern man kind of is pained to I'm pained to say that because I love winter, but it's the reality, right? There's, you know, the
But he's going beyond that. He's not, it's not like, well, yes, it's barren, but you could still plant crops in the summer.
yeah,
It's just there's nothing. No, you can't
there's
do
no
anything.
actual soil,
Right.
and the further he gets away from land, he can't sustain himself at all. I mean, you
Yeah.
can continue to catch fish, but
Yeah.
that's the whole problem with scurvy and everything else. And
Hmm.
maybe we've dug a little too deep on that theme, but that's exactly what's going on. And you're left to wonder if Mary Shelley has conceived of this intentionally,
Right.
or if it's just the natural outpouring of a soul that, for lack of a better term and not to be crass, doesn't get it.
Yeah, and I don't pretend to be smart enough to know the answer
No,
to that, but
I
it's an interesting thing to consider, isn't it?
yeah, I don't understand enough of that either, but we do indulge ourselves
Hmm.
in the opposite direction of the good gifts that God would give us.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right. I think that's probably a good place to leave it for today too. That with that idea that how often do we pursue those things that are contrary to the good and gracious will of God rather than enjoying them as God has intended. All right. Well, let's call it a day right there. We'll stop and we'll be jumping into letter 4, the last of the letters, next time. And we hope you'll join us again for the Word in the Works. He gone.